Hi, this is David Orlofsky, and welcome to the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Whether you're watching with our friends over at Torah Anytime, or wherever you watch or listen to your podcasts, as always, we are so happy to have you along for this adventure. And I finally feel like I'm getting back into the groove. You know, I was out of it for over 6 months. We didn't have any podcasts, and so starting to stretch my muscles a little bit, get back in to that attitude that people appreciate so much. And I have to thank especially the people who have made this possible to be able to bring it back, and we thank you. And Baruch Hashem, it's a tremendous chus for a lot of people. I read all of your emails, and people who tell me they get so much chizuk from this, and get strength for the week, and to face life's challenges. I'm so proud that I have the opportunity to be a part of your life. So last week I mentioned that we were going to go back to something I haven't done in a while, which is Parshas Shavua. I don't know how long that will go on for, but so far we have a 2 episode streak. So I'm going to talk about Parsha this week, which is, of course, known as Shabbos Chazon, based on the Haftarah. And it is known as Parshas Devarim. Now, Parshas Devarim and Sefer Devarim is, of course, an interesting idea because we've talked about this in the past. The names that we use, Bereshis, Shmos, Vayikra, Bamidbar, and Devarim, are not the names that the Chazal used. The names that the Chazal used are ironically closer to the Latin names that are used: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. Yeah, because, for example, Bamidbar is called Sefer Pikudim, the book of the counting. Numbers, you see how that makes sense. Leviticus is Torah's Kahanim, so the Torah of the Kahanim, Levium, in Leviticus, you see, and Devarim is really called Mishnah Torah, which is the repetition of the Torah. Ad kedei kach that you find in the Gemara that sometimes if you find a pasuk in Devarim, you have to find a pasuk someplace else in the Torah, the other 4 books, to go along with it, because it's, doesn't have that same status, which is an interesting discussion. But we call it Sefer Devarim, and there's a general rule, that is, Yisrael Kadoshim Heim. The Jewish people are holy. And if we have a way of doing things, there's got to be a reason for it. So when you look in the Rishonim never refer to Bereshis, Shmos, Vayikra, Bamidbar, Devarim. They always use the names. You'll see in Rashi, he says, like it says in Mishnah Torah, or like it says in the Sefer Pekudim. They quote the names that the Chazal gave. But we use these names, and obviously there has to be a reason for it. And I've quoted many times where Rav Noach Weinberg points out that Jews have been accused of everything. We've been accused of ritual murder. We've been accused of host desecration. We've been called capitalists, communists, atheists, everything we've been accused of. The only thing they never accuse us of is being stupid. Yeah. So if we do something, you have to be careful. All right. The Ramah gives a reason why he says mina kedinhu, because if the Jews have taken upon themselves a custom, there's probably a reason. And you find it sometimes in the Gemara where they say in this particular place they did it because they knew that people were weak in the observance of this particular mitzvah, so they were stricter with it because they knew that people had a tendency. So you have to know that there's different realities that go into it. So the fact that we call it Devarim, besides the fact that you could call it the first significant word, is that Devarim, of course, means words. And one of the interesting paradoxes about Sefer Devarim is that it's considered the words of Moshe Rabbeinu. Now, how could it be part of the words of Moshe Rabbeinu? What does that mean? Because we know that the Torah existed 2,000 years before creation. On some level, the words of Moshe Rabbeinu were Torah. And the way that it was expressed was what the Torah had already said. It's a paradox. It's one that deserves deeper examination. But the fact that the Sefer is called Devarim is tremendously significant. And that's why Rashi at the end of Parshas Pinchas says that Matos Maseh is already the introduction to Sefer Devarim. And that's why it starts with the Parsha of Nedarim. Because what's a neder? A neder means that I can create Torah with my words. So, for example, it is permitted to eat cherries. Yeah, unless the bug people get to them, then you won't be able to. But right now, I think you're allowed to eat. I think, not even sure. It's hard to keep up with all the bug people, but it's very exciting here in Israel. They just came out with fresh corn with Revai's hashgacha. And Revai is like, he's got bugs everywhere, you know. So he says you can eat this corn on the cob. Oh, very exciting. Anyway, so I've always wanted to try this. I see this all over the place. They talk about grilled corn on the barbecue. It sounds intriguing. Anyway, although I find it's just fine to boil it in a pot till it's soft and then put some butter and salt on. I'm very happy with that too. But I'll let you know. We'll keep you up. We may even have a live cooking show. We'll put the actual corn on the grill and see how it comes out. Maybe we'll do it for Ben Zman. We'll have the Rabbi Orlofsky barbecue special. You get to see how it goes. But anyway, so the cherries. You're allowed to eat cherries. But if I make a neder, I konei malai, it is forbidden for me to eat cherries. You have now created a new issur in the Torah called thou shalt not eat cherries. And if you eat those cherries with a warning and witnesses, you can be brought to court and get malchus. Just like you ate something that was non-kosher. Because your words created Torah. So we go into Devarim and we go into the situation where the whole Sefer Devarim is the words of Moshe Rabbeinu. So that's it's not by chance that we decided to call the Sefer Devarim. It's obviously significant. And it's also important for Parshas Devarim. Why? Because in Parshas Devarim, we learn a lot about how to use our words. This is obviously the week before Tisha B'Av, and that's Devarim always comes out the week before Tisha B'Av, and it's the third Haftorah of Teichacha that was given to the Jewish people, warning them of what's going to happen. And the Chavetz Chaim, in his introduction to Sefer Chavetz Chaim, points out that the destruction, the Churban of the Beis Hamikdash came about because of ill speech, Lashon Hara, Sinas Chinam, Lashon Hara, bad talk, that these things contributed to the destruction. And that's why he says that the reason the Geula is not coming, and by the way, regular watchers of the podcast know that I'm not afraid to share where I don't understand something. But he says something interesting in the introduction of Chavetz Chaim. He says, because we know that this Gullus Gullus Edom should have only lasted 1,000 years. Which means that by the year 1070, the Geula should have come. I'm not sure what the Makor is for that. And so I know I have a lot of listeners out there who are much more knowledgeable than I am. So I'd like to know what the Makor is for that. But he says it's only because of the sin of our speech that we're still in Gullus, and he brings many examples why, many reasons why. Because we can't daven, because we mess up our ability to speak. We mess up our power of speech, and that stops our tefillah from working. If the Avera came around because of Lashon Hara, then obviously until we're mataking that, we're going to keep making the same mistake. And it's more than that, because what makes a human being is their ability to speak. That's why when you play 20 questions in America, you have animal, mineral, and vegetable. And humans are in that category of animal. When they play it in this country, they have domem, which is what you'd call mineral, tzomeach, which you would call vegetable, chai, which you would call animal, and medaber. That's a human being. It's not in the same category as an animal. And medaber is how a human being is described. That we have the ability to speak. And it's more than we have the ability to speak. We can control the world with speech. We've talked about these ideas in the past, but I believe they bear repetition, especially before Tisha B'Av. The Maharal points out that the two words, daber and davar, are the same exact words. The kudot are different, but the essence of the word is the same. Daled Beis Reish. Daber davar. Why? Because everything is a word. Vayomer Elokim vayior. Vayomer Elokim. Vayomer Elokim. Hashem spoke and it came into existence. Baruch she'amar v'haya ha'olam. The world is based on speech. If you can figure out the word, then you understand the essence of everything that exists in this world. That's what they call practical Kabbalah, right? How do you say something and affect things? So we know this ourselves, right? We hear somebody sick and we daven, and we assume they're going to get better because we said something. We understand that our words have the ability to be able to affect things. And if you know the right thing to say, then you can control the Bria, the entire creation, with your words. Words have the power to affect the world around us, positively or negatively. And the negative obviously led to the Churban. The positive can lead to the rebuilding of it. Now, sometimes you see it on a very practical level. You can say something to somebody and it changes their life, positively and negatively. Yeah, you can say something that really hurts somebody and they leave, and they walk out. I am pretty sure I told this story, but it was a Kiruv organization. I forgot which town it was in. But one of their people lost their father, and he was sitting shiva, and he needed a minyan. So the Kiruv worker was trying to round up a minyan. He was going around. He says, do you have any Jewish neighbors? And he was asking if they would come and make a minyan so he could say Kaddish. And this one guy said, not me. I will never daven again. I will never pray. And he says, why? He says, I grew up in the Lower East Side. My father died when I was a little boy. Yeah. And so for a year, as a little boy, my mother would send me off to shul to say Kaddish. And the next year, it was Yurtzeit. So she sends me to shul to say Kaddish. So he was a kid. So he says Kaddish. At the end, someone comes over to him and says, why are you saying Kaddish? He says, I have Yurtzeit. He says, so where's the l'chaim? Where's the schnapps? Where's the herring? The kid looks at him. They didn't have money for food. They were poor. Their father died. You call this a Yurtzeit? Fair. So I walked out and I said, I'm never walking into a shul again. Here somebody said something, and it was so devastating that it just changed his entire life. And sometimes people can say something, and it changes their life for the positive. I know I've told this story, and I could be repeating myself. And if you heard this, feel free to fast forward. But it was particularly meaningful to me. I'm driving this Avrech to the bus. And he says, do you remember about 10 years ago you took your wife out for dinner? To Off the Square. I said, look, I'm cheap, but I take my wife out more often than once every 10 years. You know, yeah, I've taken my wife out to dinner, you know. He said, no, but 10 years ago you went to Off the Square. I said, okay. He says, and there was a waitress there from Hebrew University. And I said, yeah, I remember her. I strike up conversations with people, you know, whenever I can. Always try to engage people, especially when I see that they speak English in Israel, yeah. And you ripped off the corner of your placemat and wrote down your name and your address and your phone number and invited her for Shabbos. I said, okay, it could be. I do that a lot. You know, it's not the first time. He opens his wallet and he takes out this little piece of paper in my handwriting. I said, where'd you get this from? He says, that's my wife. She was so inspired by the fact that you invited her for Shabbos that she started taking classes, she became frum, and now she's my wife. I was amazed. That week, because the Kodesh Baruch Hu knows I have a bad memory and I forget things. That week, I get a phone call from an Israeli woman. Shalom Kvod Rav. Kiroti. And I said, no, I don't speak Hebrew and I don't talk to Israelis. I don't know who you are. So she switches to English and she says, I met you on a plane years ago on an El Al flight. And I was sitting next to you and I had just lost my father. And I was very upset. And you said to me, I can see something's bothering you. And you spent the whole flight talking to me about my father, about Olam Haba, about purpose of life, everything like this. She didn't come from a religious background. I spent the flight talking to her. At the end of the flight, when they gave you your special kosher breakfast, you ripped off the corner of your placemat, you wrote down your name, address, and phone number, invited me for a Shabbat. And I was so moved by that I became a chazeret b'tshuva. And now I realize I have a question for a rabbi, and I wasn't sure who to call, and then I realized I've been carrying this in my wallet all these years. I used to say this over to groups of kiruv workers. I said, what do you learn from this? They said, you should get business cards. What if you don't have a placemat? I said, okay, that's one thing you learn from that. I said, but what you learn is, I tell you the truth, I've done that dozens of times. And I'm convinced that every time I do it, the person just takes it and laughs behind my back and throws it in the garbage. But I keep doing it anyway. Take a chance. Who knows? For all I know, every single person I ever gave the little petek to became from, and I didn't even have to have them for Shabbos. All I had to do was reach out and show that I cared. I just said something positive. It makes a difference. We don't appreciate it. That when Shlomo Melech says that life and death is in the hands of the mouth, you can say something that will, change someone's life for the positive, and you can say something that will change someone's life for the negative. And you never know the effect that your words have on other people. And so therefore, when we go specifically into Tisha B'Av, we have to understand how important the words are. I may have told this story, but it's one of my favorite. Yeah. This fellow has been in Slobodka for 10 years, and there's Slobodka in Europe. And when you've been there a long time, you get chashav aliyah, If you're a younger guy, you get what's called a less chashav aliyah. I don't know exactly the whole hierarchy, but a revi'i, which is the fourth aliyah, is seen as not being that important. Yeah. Anyway, this guy's been there for 10 years, and he suddenly gets a revi'i. So he knows that the alt of Slobodka must be behind it, because he was behind everything. He always found a way of sending messages to people. Anyway, so he gets a revi'i. So after davening, he says, Rebbe, are you upset with me? He says, why? says, well, I got a Revi. He says, really? They gave a Baal Gaiva like you and Aliyah? I'm really surprised. He says, Rebbe, what did I do? He says, oh, you don't even remember. He says, no, tell me, Rebbe, what did I do? 10 years ago when you came here, we had an old Rosh Hashiva who was starting to lose it. He was old. He was a little disoriented. And he came in Shabbos morning and he started to put on his tefillin, and I told you, quick, tell him it's Shabbos. And you went up and you had a smile on your face. You can laugh at a person like this, who you'll work your whole life, you'll never accomplish what he accomplished, and now that he's old and he's weak, you can make fun of him? Such a Balgaiva? He says, Rebbe, you're right. I'm sorry. I'm going to learn Musa. I'm going to work on it, He says, but Rebbe, that was 10 years ago. You never said anything to me. He says, it took me 10 years to build you up to the point that I could say that to you. Somebody once observed that the Alta of Slobodka knew how to take somebody apart and put them back together again. They said, today we're half as good. We know how to take people apart. We know how to use words to break people, but not how to build them. He spent 10 years building the kid up until he could tell him what he had to hear. Because people can't always hear. You have to know whether the person can hear what it is that you have to say. And if not, don't say it. I used to write a chinuch column in the Hamadiyah, and I stopped for a bunch of reasons. But I said, I don't have to write it anymore. I can sum it up for you. Very easy. Don't say 90% of what you want to say. Because they've done studies, and 90% of what parents say to kids are negative. So just say the 10% that's positive. And use your words to build people. Because you can. You can say something nice and make a person feel like $1 million. I was waiting online before Rosh Hashanah. It was pandemonium in the supermarket, as you can imagine. And this woman, everyone was yelling at her and giving her a hard time. She was doing the best she could under the circumstances. And when I got up there, I said to her, Kol Kavod, look how hard you're working. And you should know, you're not just, check out, you're helping people make Yantif. This is a tremendous mitzvah. I feel bad. I mean, I see you going like nonstop. He goes, well, before the Yantif, it's like this. I said, can I get you a coffee or something? After I pack up, I'm happy to go eat. No, I'm all right. I have a break coming up. He goes, all right, because, you got to take care of yourself. And you have to, I left, she had a smile on her face. It didn't cost me anything. It's taking a moment to be able to say a kind word that's going to make a difference to people's lives. And you have so many opportunities to say hello, to say something positive, to say something nice. I remember I was in the airport and there was this tall black guy who was working security and he was yelling at everybody. He was upset, I was like very upset, And I said, tough day, huh? And he says, yeah, you don't know the half of what I'm going through is that. I said, I'm really sorry, Listen, I said, we're brothers. We share each other's pain, I'm sorry you're going through this, whatever, Hope it made a difference. You can take a moment to say something that's going to have a positive impact on a person's life. You don't even realize it. How many chances you have a chance to say something back? And there are times you look back and you say, gee, I really should have said something. I don't know why I didn't say anything. It's, I find this when I pay a shiva call. Sometimes there are 100 people there and I'm not really that important. And, I sit there quietly and, no one's really talking to me and, whatever. I listen and I leave. Sometimes people want to talk to me. They want to hear what I have to say. They want to hear my words, how they're meaningful. And I take that so seriously. I'm a speaker. That's what I do. I was going to say that's what I do for a living, but I don't make a living, so I can't say it. But it's what I'm supposed to do for a living. But when I get up to speak, I say tefillah, because you don't know what you're going to say that's going to affect people and how it's going to touch their lives. It's an amazing thing. Who knows? Who knows what you're going to say that people are going to remember afterwards? And people quote back to me things that I've said. People were walking around with little pieces of ripped placemats that I gave them. You know what I mean? That had meaning to them. You can say something and your words will echo with people years later. Sometimes positively and sometimes negatively. I had somebody once, he says to me, this past Yom Kippur, I finally forgave you. I was like, what? I had made some kind of joke. You know, he brought his calabai to visit. You know, I made some kind of joke, whatever it is. And he was so hurt. It took him years, he said, till he could forgive me. Oh, gosh. I didn't mean to hurt anybody's feelings, you know. You got to be careful. You don't know what you're going to say, how it's going to affect somebody. And you can say something that's positive, you know. I'll tell you something I did once. I don't know what the effects were. This father brought his son to the 7 o'clock minyan that I was going to at the time. And the kid was davening. Very nice. I was really impressed. And I made a mental note of it. You know, this kid's really davening nicely. And then before I left, I went over to the father in front of the son, and I said, I just want to tell you, your son davens beautifully. I said, you don't see many kids that age who mamash come to shul and daven so well. He goes, well, thank you very much. I said, no, I'm not saying it to be nice. I'm telling you, I was inspired by watching his davening. I hope that had a positive impact. Maybe the father beat him a little less. You know, maybe the kid walked away thinking, yeah, I'm doing something good and it's appreciated. You know, people want to hear words of appreciation. People want to hear that they're good people. People want to have their accomplishments celebrated. And to say something nice is so easy. My friend Chanukh Teller has a book called "It's a Small Word After All." One of his 127 books, you know, one for each of the Medinas in the time of the first story. But the whole thing is about how somebody can say something that changes somebody's life. Sefer Devarim and Parshas Devarim is telling us that your words have the ability to be able to build, and your words have the ability to destroy. It was Lashon Hara that destroyed the Beis HaMikdash, and it'll be the positive words of tefillah and of Torah and of good wishes and saying nice things that can change things around. To be able to look at it from a different perspective, be able to say something that's gonna give somebody a sense of like, wow, I didn't think of it that way. I didn't look at it that way. I can reframe it. So let's take upon ourselves now in these days before Tisha B'Av particularly, and throughout the year, to be a little bit more careful with what we say. I mean, you know that there's all the emphasis on Shmiras HaLashon this time of year, and making the shiurim and all the kind of things on Lashon Hara. Because if we, as the Chavetz Chaim says in his introduction, if we can metakein our koyach hadibur, if we can fix our speech, then we're in a position to be able to go on and rebuild the world and rebuild the Beis HaMikdash. And now we come to the question and answer part of our program. Nechama asks, whatever happened to the Jewish Observer? It seems like we need it now more than ever. Oh boy. For the younger people in the audience, the good, they used to have a journal called the Jewish Observer. And it used to be articles written by Rabbanim or lay people on important topics. And they would deal with it with a certain amount of depth. And it was edited by Rav Bolman Zatzal. And it was a journal. It wasn't a magazine. It was a journal. It had mamoshes. It had weight to it. It was something real. And then the magazines came out, and there was such a plethora, or if you have a reading vocabulary, a plethora of these magazines, that there was just so much for people to be able to read. And the Jewish Observer fell by the wayside because people, given the choice between something that's deep and meaningful and light and fluffy, will almost always take the light and fluffy. And that's why chocolate is much more popular than bran, and that's why cereal that's mostly sugar with a little bit of salt is much more popular than a nice healthy morning cereal. So the Jewish Observer is something that is sorely missed, and there should be something on that level, on that intellectual level, that's being offered to the Jewish community, and it's not. So I mourn its passing along with you. And we should all have a nechama. Okay. Does the Rav have any suggestions for Yeshiva Bachadu as an outlet during Bein Hastarim or on a long Motzi Shabbos? Depends on the person. What do I mean? I was an Avreich already. I had been running NCSY for 10 years, and I came back to Israel to sit and learn. And it was my first year back, and I had some kind of question on the Mishkan, and I asked another Avreich, and he started rattling off all the details of the Mishkan. And I said, how do you know that? And he says, I've always been careful to do Parshas HaShavua with Rashi. And when I came to Truma Tetzava, I went over it every year with all of the details, with all of the things to make sure that I got it down. I said, where do you have time to do Parshas HaShavua? He says, Motzi Shabbos. I'm not doing anything else any night, so it gives me a chance to do Parsha. So the answer is that free time can be used to be able to learn those kind of things that you would like to learn and don't have the time in a normal day, right? I have a friend of mine who, during his spare time, would read the Hakdamas to Svarim. There's all kinds of amazing things in the Hakdamas, but who's reading the Hakdama, And he would learn all the Hakdamas, and he had information that nobody in the entire world had, I remember I always had this question. I did a Parsha shir about it maybe 25 years ago. On Parsha Shmos, it says that Hashem made them batim, for Miriam and Yocheved. So from Yocheved came the houses of Kahuna and Leviah, and from Miriam came the Malchus. So from Yocheved, it was pretty clear. She had Aaron, who was the head of all of the Kohanim, and Moshe was a Levi. That was pretty straightforward. How does Miriam come from Malchus? It's a more complicated thing. So I said, what's the association? And I looked around at my Svarim, and I couldn't find it anywhere. So I went to one of these people with the computers, with the 90,000 Svarim, he does a search. In a Hakdama to a Shailas and Shuvas Sefer, somewhat obscure, his mother's name was Miriam, and so he wrote in the Hakdama an answer to this question, how Miriam is connected to Malchus and why what she did, how that ties into the Malchus in honor of her mother. How was I ever going to find that? So, I remember I just went to the Derech dinner, and I saw a bunch of my old Talmidim, and we were reminiscing about old time. I had some guys who were shia. They were all working very hard. So came Hanukkah. We had off like 2 days. So I said, "So what'd you guys do with your vacation?" So this one guy said, "Oh, it was great. I just lay in my room and listened to a Victor Miller tapes." And I said, "Well, you know how to party, huh?" he says, well, I don't have time during this man. You know what I mean? I'm busy. So it gives me a chance to listen to things. So if there are things that you want to learn, I think the way some of the places can put it is Masha Liba Chafetz. There's stuff that you want to learn that you don't have the time during the Zman. It gives you a chance to be able to sit down and learn things. Yeah. Now, that's assuming that you want to spend your time doing something worthwhile. I certainly understand if you don't. I understand it 100%. It's not even a question. Yeah. Someone wrote the Chazon Ish during Bein HaZmanim that I'm not in yeshiva. How many hours a day do I have to learn Torah? He says, well, if you're not in yeshiva, so then you have a din of a balabas. And he says a balabas works 3 hours a day and learns 9 hours a day. So you only have to learn 9 hours a day. So the guy writes back, I don't do that during the Zman. You want me to do it during Bein HaZmanim? So not everybody who, when they're given a break, says, oh, I want to sit down and, and learn something. So what else can you do? Some people enjoy reading. And I once asked Moshe Shapiro, about literature. So he says, no, if you hold it to Chachma, then you can do it. Yeah. Obviously, it's got to be something that's, I had, when I have a little downtime in my day, when I use the room without a mezuzah. So I usually take a classic novel, read it through, I remember I was speaking once in a very fancy school that had a director of the English literature department. High school. Anyway, at some point in my talk, I quoted Bleak House from Charles Dickens. She came to me at the end and said, you read Bleak House? And I said, yeah, because how? I said, 2 pages at a time in the room without a mezuzah. She goes, I couldn't get through Bleak House. I said, listen, this is my school of continuing education, Conrad is one of the most painful things I've ever read. Secret Agent. I read it because it's a classic. Lord Jim was a little better. But painful experiences. So if a person enjoys reading and that's downtime to relax, that's great. Yeah. I am a proponent of exercise, especially if you're in yeshiva all day and you're sitting. I had a heart attack and a bypass operation. And when I was afterwards in the rehabilitation program, they said something that really stuck with me. They said, today, sitting is the new smoking. As unhealthy as smoking is for your heart, sitting is. You have to get up and you have to move. I remember when I make more of an effort to go walking. I have a little maslul, 3.5 kilometers, that I walk around Har Nof. And I'm huffing and puffing and I'm walking. And I keep passing people who are walking and I realize they're not doing this for exercise. They just don't have a car. It's not like, so I once heard this redneck comic, and he was like, I don't get the gym. How did this start? Someone said, hey, Luke, can I come down to your factory and pick up some heavy stuff? I'll pay you for it. I was like, yeah, okay. But take a walk. Get out there. It's good for fresh air. Obviously not if you're living in New York because there's always, giant smoke clouds coming from Canada. But, itself, go out, go for a walk, stretch him a little bit, get some fresh air. It's so important to take care of your health. If there's There are exercises you can do that don't require a lot of equipment, and I think that's a wonderful thing to do. Music is very relaxing. We spoke about music last week. Music can be a very spiritual experience. Listen to it and gives you a chiyas and an enjoyment and relaxation. Rabbi Orlofsky said that he asked his Rebbe, Reb Tuvia Goldstein, are you allowed to listen to recorded music during the Sefira? And he said, no. He says, what about a bocha between Bein HaStarim who wants to relax? Can he listen to it? He says, yeah, sure. Because he needs the music to help him relax, settle his mind. So that's a good thing to do. And for Motzi Shabbos, it's okay to get together with friends, have a cup of coffee, sit down and talk, do something like that, which would be nice. Now, I learned in Eretz Yisrael, first time in 1975. There was maybe one traffic light in Yerushalayim on the corner of King George and Yafo, and it turned into a blinker at 8 o'clock at night. I mean, talk about provincial. This was a real backwater kind of a place. There was one thing to do, as you could go to Har Zion, and the diaspora yeshiva had a bunch of guys who were rock stars who had all become from, and they would do a concert. And it was eclectic. There were non-from tourists. There were yeshiva guys. There was all people from all walks of life who would come and listen to these concerts because there was nothing else to do. Nothing else to do. So, so if there's something healthy that a person can do, I think that's also a good way to spend your time. Yedidya Schaeferman asks, does it say clearly in halacha that you may not pray mincha after Shkiyah? Most Hasidim do daven after Shkiyah. There's a Rashi in Brachos, that says the day starts at Oz HaShachar and it ends at Seis. So Hasidim are relying on that. There are definitely shittas that say that the day ends at Seis HaKochavim. There are also those who say it begins at Nates and ends at Shkiyah. Parenthetically, that's the difference between Mogen Avram Zmanim and the Gra Zmanim. The Gra is going from Nates to Shkiyah, and therefore it's a shorter period of time. And each hour is going to be a little longer, the 12 hours. And the Mogen Avram is going from the Olois to Tzeis. Interesting, a chassid told me once that, when there's a Rebbe in training, they don't do Mishnah Berurah. They do Shulchan Aruch with the Mogen Avram. So it could be that because the Mogen Avram, says the day goes from Olas HaShachar to Tzeis, maybe that's why. Can't say for sure. The question is the people who do it after Tzeis. That I don't have an answer for. Is it right for rabbis to teach in girls' schools, or it should be a job for moras? When I used to teach Gemara, I used to say there's in Gemara only two correct answers. It's a machlekes or it depends. This one I say is it depends. Rav Wolf, who made Wolf Seminary in Bnei Brak, is obviously a man. He made a seminary. Yeah. Rabbi Refson, who made Nevei Yerushalayim, is obviously a man. Made Nevei Yerushalayim. Rabbi Kuberman, who started Mechala, was obviously a man. Yeah. And a lot of the schools were run by men. Yeah. So the reason is that it felt that there were men who were able to give a certain level of depth that there weren't that many qualified women. Today, people maintain that there are more qualified women than there were in the past, and they're able to do it. having said that, let me tell you a story that I heard once. Yehoshua Hartman, who of course wrote the Parish on Gur Aryeh. He says one time he gets a call from this older woman speaking Hebrew, and you realize it's Nechama Leibowitz. She's going up to ask him a kasha on the Gur Aryeh. And she's asking questions, and he's trying to explain it, and, and he's getting very agitated. Because that's how guys learn in yeshiva. You can see people yelling at each other, and he suddenly realizes, I'm sitting here yelling at this 90-year-old woman. And I said, I finally said, okay, I hear what you're saying. And she goes, Atos stam omer et zeh. You're just saying that. So I said, well, what was your impression? She's obviously very smart, but she never learned in yeshiva. She never learned Gemara. You have a different perspective when you learn in yeshiva from Rebbeim. It gives you a different perspective of things to be able to understand. So when it comes to teaching halacha, or it comes to teaching certain other things, the more that you know, the greater is your ability to be able to go on and bring across ideas. So that's why when it comes to these kind of things, it falls under the category of Eis Lasos LaHashem Eifeo Terasecha, in order to make sure that that women are getting the top education. You want to get the top people to be able to do it. So there's always the danger, therefore, that problems can happen, and problems do happen, and that's only because people don't keep Gedarim. I taught in the seminary for many years, and after a while, my daughter started teaching there, and when we compared notes, we realized that we didn't always know who we were talking about, because I called everyone by their last name, and she called everybody by their first name. And she says, why do you call everyone by your last name? I said, because I'm a man teaching in a seminary, and I'm trying to maintain a certain distance. I can't be buddy with the Talmidot as I can with the Talmidim, as I can with a guy, So you have to make sure that you keep up your Gedarim and to be very careful. And so the reason I say it's an Eis Lasos LaHashem, if you can find a qualified woman to be able to do what the man can do, then that's fine. The question comes, if you're going to sacrifice the level of education in order to keep the men out, is that a positive development? I don't think so. Is it a dangerous situation? Yeah, it is. And you have to make sure that a person can handle this. Remember Weinbach, who taught in the, a couple of seminaries, he told me he used to teach like this. Look up at the ceiling, And, my daughter was in a class, and there was this Israeli male model. And evidently he still, even though he became frum, still has that male model look, And he was speaking to the girls about whatever, in Yoni Kedusha, V'Tara, etc. So one of the girls said, then why are you here speaking to girls? He pulls out his glasses and gives it to one of the girls and says, put these on. Goes, oh my gosh, you're blind. Because, whenever I talk to girls, I take off my glasses. And like you say, without them, I'm practically blind. So that's why I do it. So it's a makam sakana, but sometimes it's calculated risk that people have to be able to take. Okay, that's it for this week. If you want to find out more about the show, you can go to my website, RabbiOrlofsky.com, and you can sign up for one of our online shiurim. You can leave a comment. And that's it. Until next time, I am David Orlofsky, and this is the Rabbi Orlofsky Show.
It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Torah and Simcha, ready to go. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Knowledge and wisdom will help you grow. Lots of fun in every episode, and we don't have to rhyme. No, we don't. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. on RabbiOrlofsky.com. Torah anytime, YouTube and more. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Torah and Simcha, ready to go. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Till next time, till we meet again. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show.